anyone who's left, take your Bibles. We're going to be in 1 Peter chapter 1, continuing the theme of believers as elect exiles. Last week we started by talking about that this is what God scatters his people for, is for a kingdom purpose. And this week we're going to look at that we are exiles with eternity in mind. And as we read this, we'll see that the great hope for the believer, our longing, is for our ultimate salvation in eternity. It's a lengthy passage, so buckle up. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Though you do not now see him, you believe in him, and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Concerning this salvation, the prophets who prophesied about the grace that was to be yours searched and inquired carefully, inquiring what person or time the Spirit of Christ in them was indicating when he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the subsequent glories. It was revealed to them that they were serving not themselves, but you, in the things that have now been announced to you through those who preach the good news to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. Let's pray. Lord, our salvation that is yet to come, our final deliverance from the pain and the memory of sin, is something that even angels long to look to. I pray that we would keep our eyes fixed on you, that as exiles in a foreign land, we know that our citizenship is in heaven with you. And until that day comes, where we're with you, I pray that we would keep our eyes on heaven, no matter what happens. That the trials that we go through are yours to test, to purify, to cleanse, and that we trust in your good plan that's been yours since the beginning. Give us confidence in your word this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. Three things to pull out from this. The first one, just so much to unpack, is our salvation comes with a sure hope. With a sure hope. Look, there's all kinds of sure things that fail. McDonald's sank millions of dollars into the grown-up cheeseburger, the Arch Deluxe. And when it came out, it tanked. Because no one goes to McDonald's for a grown-up cheeseburger. They go there for the Happy Meal. They go there for the good stuff, not the healthy stuff. Facebook, during the height of the smartphone boom, decided they could get in on the action. They came out with their own cell phone, and it tanked. Hollywood will release a couple of flops every year. They'll sink millions of dollars into the advertising costs. And the first major one was the E.T. video game released by Atari that had so many unused, unsold, unplayed copies that they eventually just buried them in the desert. Harold Miner was such a hot recruit or hot prospect coming out of college that when he was signed to the NBA, he was given the nickname Baby Jordan. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Harold Miner. A couple of good hoop heads. All right. Okay, good for you. Ford sank millions into the Edsel. Sure thing. And it flopped. Look, there's so much for us to unpack from these verses. And our salvation comes with a sure hope because it's held by a power that guarantees our salvation. And it's in verse 3. The resurrection of Christ from the dead. The surety of Christ being raised from the dead is what guarantees our salvation. Because Christ is alive, our salvation has a sure hope. It's not something that we guess or take a flyer on. It's something that we can bank on. It is sure, it's certain, and it'll be revealed on the other side. That's what this is talking about. It's talking about us being given a full salvation where all of this comes to pass. It'll be on the other side of eternity. But because God has risen Christ from the dead, that means we can trust that his promise is going to come, that we're going to be secure. Okay? If God was faithful to raise Christ from the dead, then he'll be faithful to secure our salvation fully and finally on the other side. The wonderful part is that it is sure. And it's a living hope. It's a living hope. Okay? We're not home in this world. Just look on TV sometime. We're not home here. This is like when we talked about last week when we go to Disney World, and it's very obvious that the person in front of us doesn't understand that this is America and we are in a hurry. What are we in a hurry for? We don't know. But we got to be somewhere, and we've got to be there yesterday. And so you can either choose to stand and look, or you can get out of the way. That's the world that we live in. This is not our home. We have a living hope. We are exiles. So we don't find our hope in the world. We don't find our hope in the city of man, because God has given us a city of God, a new Jerusalem, a heaven that will redeem even the earth itself. And that is where we find our hope. That is where we find our surety, because everything here is frail and fallen and fickle. We're also given, as Peter says, an inheritance. Look at how it's described in verse 4. It's imperishable. Doesn't go away. Anderson Cooper, the journalist for CNN, is descended from the Vanderbilts. And one time he was asked, "So, how's that trust fund?" And he just shrugged and said, "There isn't one. The family that built the Biltmore broke. They don't have a trust fund anymore." Now, let's all feel sorry for him, because his mom's last name was Vanderbilt, and that opens up quite a few doors. But think about that. The inheritance of generations is gone. You think about what you got from your grandparents or your uncle, and you're like, yeah, it went pretty quick. We thought it was going to fix everything, and it went fast. Even the great gifts go quickly. It's undefiled, and it's unfading. No matter what we get, eventually it will fade. Our new car, the phone in our pocket, the clothes on our back, eventually everything is going to fade. If you go to any thrift store, Goodwill, or yard sale, again, it's filled with yesterday's treasures. And they fade. They don't fit. They go out of style. They become obsolete. All of these things happen. But God has promised us a sure hope that is a true inheritance that will not perish, not fade, not be defiled. It's the city of man and the city of God. You can write these words down as a comparison. City of man versus the city of God. One is temporary and the other is eternal. As old as our houses are, as old as our country is, as old as the tectonic plates that we are standing on right now, they're temporary. That's why whenever they go do a dig site for dinosaurs, and they're like, wow, it's the middle of the desert, and look at this, it's fish. Yeah, because when the dinosaurs were alive, it was an ocean. That means that what was down was up, and what was up was down, and all of this happens. It's temporary. Even the ground that we walk on is temporary. Go out to the beach, the sand shifts. The sandbar moves in and out. The shore changes. The profile of it looks different. All of it's temporary. All of this is going to be gone. The city of God is eternal. It's not going to fade. It's not going to go away. The map will never change. The city of man is fallen. Apple News this morning said that we are on pace for this year to be the first since 2016 that we have had more mass deadly shootings than there are days in the year. So far, there have been 251 in the United States, where, according to the FBI, at least 4 people have to be shot in one setting. 250. You know how many I could remember when I scanned the list? A couple. You know why? Because it's so normal that it doesn't make the news unless it's double digits. And it doesn't stay in the news unless it's more than 20. We've gotten to the point where we look at the news and we see what happens. We go, oh, only 8 got killed. Oh, only? And it doesn't even make a blip unless it's double digits. This is a fallen world. And when I read that, it said this is the first time since 2016, I'm sitting there going, that wasn't that long ago. Like, that's like saying it's been 3 days since our last accident. It's been a great, safe work environment. It doesn't meet. This is a fallen world. And it's broken. And it's on full display. That's the pinnacle of it, where some wackadoo opens fire on a crowd. But in less glaring ways, this world is fallen. It's infected with a virus called sin. And it has been ever since Genesis 3, however long ago that was, where this world is destined to futility. Had lunch on Tuesday with my second cousins, it's my dad's cousins and their kids, and was asking how things were in Iowa. And I said, oh, it's flooded. Missouri overran. That's a picture of the fall, where water that is supposed to bring life, irrigation that's supposed to grow crops, instead becomes a curse. We watch it every September and October when we watch the tropics, and we see if there's something moving our way. That's the fall. We see it when we look at the news and we look at our neighbors and we see our friends' kids come home, our kids' friends come over and say, yeah, I'm going with Dad this weekend. It's my turn with him. That's all pictures of a fallen world. And that is the city of man. It's temporary and it's fallen. The city of God is eternal and perfect. All of this junk that we read about, that we watch, addiction, dysfunction, sin, violence, one day it's all going to be a memory. And heaven's headlines aren't going to bleed. It won't be anything that we ever think about anymore. It's unsure. The city of man is unsure. Raise your hand if you thought October 1929, the day before the stock market blew, that anyone thought, this is awesome. We were riding a wave of prosperity. We had conquered Europe. We had conquered the ocean with that little blip called the Titanic that we figured out. We were riding this wave, and then all of a sudden, boom, bottom went out. And there were reports of stockbrokers literally jumping out of windows to kill themselves in light of that, who had lost everything. We saw it with the recession 10 years ago. We see it with all of these things where the world of man, the city of man, is unsure. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. City of God is sure. It's certain. We don't ever have to worry about the value. I mean, if we run out of money in heaven, we just dig it off the road. Just think about that for a second. Don't have to print more. You pick up pebbles. You're good. You got it. City of man's also unstable. I remember one time running when we lived in Murray, and I ran past the old high school. It was built in the 40s or something like that. And on the side, it had the radiation symbol. And I just kind of, oh, that's interesting. We just kind of moved there, so I called my dad and said, hey, sign on the side of the building that says this. What does that mean? He goes, oh, that's a fallout shelter. And I went, a what? He goes, yeah, in case the Russians bombed us, it was a place you could go. Really? Tell me more. That was an unstable time that a lot of you lived through, where you can remember having drills for that. Our generation experiences that every time we go to the airport. That whenever we go to the airport, we're reminded that this is an unstable world. That no matter how clever we think we are, someone can still slip something through security. Happens all the time. In fact, the TSA even has a glass case of the stuff that they catch. Okay? So if that's the stuff they caught, imagine what still gets through. That's because we live in an unstable world. City of heaven, city of God is fixed. Doesn't break. And for all of you that have DIY projects at your house that you're just staring at, just know that in heaven, it's fixed. All of it. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. Someone testify. Verse 6 through 9 tells us that our salvation is purified through trial, okay? So the bridge is in verse 6. It says, in this you rejoice. And that this is the salvation that's yet to come, okay? So we rejoice in that one day all of this is going to be made right. But until that day comes, we have trials. So there's a contrast. The city of God, which is eternal, our salvation that is sure and fixed and forever, is contrasted with trials that, as Peter says, last for a little while. There's a difference. It's kind of like the scales. So on one side you have an eternity fixed with God. On the other side you have temporary trials that we go through. Two questions. One, when has it ever felt like a little while? And two, when was it something that you were ever glad for? Again, it doesn't diminish the weight of trial, because ask anyone who's going through trial or has gone recently through it, did it feel like a little while? No. Surgery's awful. Recovery's great. Physical therapy is hard. Walking feels wonderful. Doesn't feel like it when you're going through the process of healing, of repair, of any of that. Doesn't feel like a little while. That's where we remember that where God works, and even though our trials are difficult, they are for a purpose. They are for a purpose. Look what it says, okay? So the tested genuineness of your faith, verse 7, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. What happens is, and what I want us to kind of walk through that verse. So the first thing is our faith is more precious than gold. Gold's really valuable, right? That's what you always see on TV, buy gold, buy gold, it never goes away. It's not like junk stocks or Bitcoin, it keeps its value. Our salvation's more precious than that. And that's why I love the hymn, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus, because what does it say? Turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of this earth will grow what? Strangely dim. Hey, take all the bright, shiny stuff. Never been to Vegas, but I've taken my kids to Chuck E. Cheese. I kind of imagine that it's pretty similar. All of that. You take all of that allure, all of that glitz and glamour and sexiness, and all the stuff the world has to offer, and when you throw it and you compare it next to Jesus, it looks like trash. That's what our faith is more precious than. All the riches and glitz and glamour that the world has. Second thing is that it's tested by fire. Fire not only has the ability to destroy, but it also has the ability to cleanse. So fire can cauterize a wound. Fire can burn off impurity. The building revolution of the early 20th century came because of steel, which took all the impurities in iron and burned them out. So what you were left with was something stronger, better than what you had before. And it doesn't come because they're nice to it and they pat it and they ask it how it's feeling. They burn it. Fire, forge. Like, watch one of these forging shows. They go after it. It's hot. It burns. They get burned. I don't think any of these guys have eyebrows, but it burns. And trials have a way of taking everything in our lives that's not like Jesus and burning them away. That's what trials do. Trials take everything in our life that's not like Jesus and it burns it away. And it leads to glory. Think about that. Not our glory, but Christ. Trials make Jesus more glorious. Because when we come through the other side, we're a brighter reflection of who He is, not us. Trials make Jesus more glorious. How amazing is that? But it's not easy. And that trial and that hope comes from someone we can't see. See, if we can see it, we know how long to endure it. So the other day I went for a run, and I saw the storm clouds coming. And I thought, okay, I've got half a lap, and I'm done. And that last half of a lap was the worst half lap I've done in a long time. But I knew where the finish line was. I knew that's the sidewalk, the car's right over there, and I can get done, and I can get in the car before that ugly cloud gets here. Here's the thing, guys. In our life, God doesn't always show us where the sidewalk is. See, I can see it and I can go, okay, just a little bit longer and I'm going to be there. But for so many of us, we go and we keep pressing and we keep going and we don't know where the sidewalk is. But our encouragement from the Word is to keep going. By the power of Christ and with the help of the Spirit and the promise of the Father, press on. Press on. Press on through the diagnosis. Press on through the difficulty. Press on through the pain. Press on through the trial. Because with the power of the Spirit and the promise of the Father, God will see it. The last thing. Our salvation is rooted in God's redemptive plan. Past, present, and future. Okay, this isn't something that's made up on the fly. They recently found all of Bob Ross's paintings. Remember him? Big afro, taught painting. What would happen if he made a mistake? He would say, there's no mistakes, only happy accidents. And what intended to be whatever, he would make it into a tree. And God doesn't do that. God's not going through our life like Bob Ross, going, okay, everything's going great. Oh, made a mistake. Okay, we're going to fix that and we're going to make this look different. No, God has a fixed and steady and sure plan from eternity past to eternity future that cannot be swayed. God's not going to be thwarted by our mistakes, or as Bob Ross would say, our happy accidents. This is something sure. And Peter gives us a glimpse at that past, present, and future in verses 10 through 12. He talks about the past, which are the prophets, Old Covenant, Old Testament. Who are the prophets talking about? Jesus. The prophets, when they spoke, were talking about Christ. They were talking about the sacrifice of Christ, the suffering of Christ, the passion of Christ, the life of Christ, the future that would come through Christ. They were talking about all of that, and they were talking about this sure salvation that would come through the shedding of his blood. This is who God was talking about all throughout the Old Covenant, all throughout the Old Testament. It's all pointing to Jesus. It's all headed that way. God's not just making it up on the fly and going, well, let's try something different now. That didn't work. Present, our current sufferings, as we reflect the sufferings of Christ, and are the fulfillment of what the prophets spoke. We are going through God's redemptive plan. And just like fire purifies, cauterizes, and burns away impurities, the trials we go through, the difficulty we go through, is one of God's means of grace to make us more like Jesus. We don't go through stuff without any purpose. This is not a nihilistic, meaningless existence where stuff just happens. Things happen to make us more like Christ. Even the indescribable suffering is intended in the sovereignty of God to make us more like Christ. Somehow. We don't always understand how, and we certainly don't understand why, but we trust that God is not making it up as he goes. There's also a future. There's a future hope, and Peter alludes to this at the end of verse 12. There's going to come a day where we're going to experience what angels can't. Okay? Things into which angels long to look. There's going to come a day where we will experience a redemption and a glorification that not even the angels get to experience. Just think about that one for a minute. That God has set man in his image, according to his likeness, and will redeem man. And he will redeem us, and he will make us glory. We will shine his glory in a way that not even angels do. Just wrap your head around that. Because every time angels show up, they show up with power, they show up with authority, and they don't get to experience what we will. God has not created us for futility and for insignificance. God has created us to bear his image and has redeemed us so that we would be his kingdom citizens. And this is all part of his redemptive plan. I want you to think about this one for a minute, and if you want, you can write it down. But think back, okay? So we know how God's working present. We don't know how he's going to work future. But because he's working present and past, we trust future. So just think about this one for a minute, okay? The people, the circumstances, maybe you have one of those aha moments where you go, oh, now I get it. This is God's plan in my life. This is God working. And it could be something that happened a long time ago. It could be something you're going through now. But think about that one for a minute. A time where you knew, oh, this is part of God's plan for my life. And if you want to, write it down. But just think about that one for a minute. About a time where you knew God was working in your life. Paul tells us in Philippians 1 that he who began a good work in you will see it through to completion. God started something years and years ago, before you were born. He laid the groundwork, laid the track for your life. And what he started, he's going to finish.